everybody. Welcome to our 10 Capital AMA today. We have a great content-based portion and then a couple pitches at the end. We're going to be talking about monetizing data, and we're so happy to have Alexander McCaig here from TARTLE. He's going to be our expert today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it along to our CEO, Hall, to get him introduced.
Great, Shane. Thanks so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Today, we have the pleasure of having Alexander McCaig. I met him in Santa Fe, New Mexico a few months ago and saw the things he was doing with his company, TARTLE, which was basically helping people capture data from their startup and then either help them monetize it directly or put it through data markets and so forth. And I said, well, you got to come out and talk to my companies, because over half the companies that come to us have a vision of monetizing their data somewhere along the way. And it's for fundraising, it can be very helpful because it increases your total available market, gives you another revenue stream. It gives you another way of making money, increasing margins. I've had several clients come back and say when they were going to exit their business, they found they would get 5x times revenue, but if they were monetizing their data, they would get 10 times their data, and found that that was a really great way to increase the valuation on the exit. So we encourage all startups up front to make a roadmap slide and showcase out how you have the vision of monetizing data. At the very early stage, you really need to work on your core product and service first, but if you have a roadmap to show you're going down the path of doing something with data, you'll find more interest from investors, and you'll find more investors interested in your deal, and you can more easily justify the valuation you may want to go for. So that's why we're here today, is to hear from Alexander about how do you do that? What do you need to do to set up for it? Because there's so many different ways of monetizing data. It could be, your customer list. It could be so many other things. We will talk as best we can about different applications, but this will be a good introduction into it, and looking forward to it. The webinar will be recorded. We'll provide it to you afterwards as well. With that, let me go and pass it over to Alexander. And Alexander, tell us a little bit more about your background, and then let's kick into the slides.
Yeah, tremendous. Hall, I appreciate you getting this set up. Everyone that's joining here from the 10 Capital Network, and Shane for also pulling this whole thing together. Just in terms of my background, back in the earlier days around 2015, I had a background in finance, specifically private equity. And I realized that the greater portion of people in this world lack the ability to certain financial assets. They were redlined from it, but 65% of the globe was participating in this world economy. And I said, well, there's obviously an issue here if there's such a dearth of availability for people to participate. So I said, I wonder if there's a solve for it. And so in the earliest days before, TARTLE became what it is today, the idea was that people going forward are generating vast amounts of information through their internet connected devices, whether it be cell phone, tablet, computer, TV, or even the refrigerator in their home if they're lucky enough. And looking at that, I realized that what could be more important than actually understanding the behaviors, right, psychometric profiles of humanity at large, and then underwriting people on that behavior itself. And so that spun me down this idea of like, that's interesting. I wonder how much that data is actually worth. And then I realized from that compounding question, that if we brought it a little bit further, that to figure out how much that data is worth, you have to have a publicly traded value to it. And that essentially spurred up the genesis for what TARTLE is today, is that a data marketplace had to be created where people all over the globe had the ability to participate in taking the data that they generate online and turning it into a fungible asset which could be traded seamlessly and instantaneously to parties across the globe. And so in 2019, we had launched TARTLE as a entity to the general public, and in short order, we were in 220 plus countries across the world in our first 9 months of operation. And we found that what we have here is something of great value. And then as that continued to expand in its evolution, we saw that TARTLE was not only beneficial just for the individuals that were selling the data, ones that were taking power back for the thing they're creating online, but also for businesses, because the business is but an entity that is also generating its own information. And so with that, we created a system of great balance, allowing people and businesses to monetize the data they create day in and day out. And that is where we are today. And my plan is to bring you through the simplicity and procedure and essentially a strategy that you can take as business owners or individuals for monetizing the information you create um, constantly online every second of every hour of every day. So, Hall, thank you very much. If you don't mind, if you guys could bring up the slides so we could start to walk through that. And ladies and gentlemen who are listening, I kept this extremely simple. I kept it short because this is something that doesn't need to be complicated. And you're coming here so that we can help educate you on the matter of what is possible for monetizing data, whether it be in your startup or if you're a larger enterprise. Makes no difference. But in the specific case, I'd like to bring you through this and tell you a little bit about what that procedure is going to look like. So, Hall, could you move us on to the next slide, please? Fantastic. So, short agenda here today, ladies and gentlemen. 6 points to this. Typically, the macro market overview for those of you that don't have a major context or don't live in the data realm day in and day out like I do. I'd like to give you a little idea of how this is growing and why there's such a focus on it, and why even Hall and the respective 10 Capital Network is talking about the aspects of data, because the value of it has increased dramatically since times of COVID. And then beyond that, how TARTLE can be used as a solution amongst moving that data and monetizing it, why you should do it, how you should do it, and also collecting more of that data from your customers so that you can enhance your business models and then repeat that process over and over. So, next slide, please. Now, in simplicity, we have seen that with the growth in computing and the relative decrease in cost of storage for data in devices that are connected to the internet, that the amount of data being created is in such a vast number that it's very difficult for the human beings to actually wrap their head around it in a very cognitive sense. But when we apply a dollar value to it, we start to see that the information is really the breadwinner for a majority of all businesses, right? If you don't have good information or you don't have good data, you can't make good business decisions, or you can't trade on it. For instance, if you're in financial markets, or you can't underwrite people properly if you're in insurance. And so what we find is that the economics around data are quite interesting. There are many aspects to businesses and the growth that we've seen here over time that are becoming more data driven, and that data driven can then be inextricably linked to a dollar value. And so just in a short order, we've seen that well in the magnitude of $1 trillion, which is an absolutely enormous sum of this data, actually, in its value worldwide, is going to continue to have that upward curve up into 2025 and essentially double and possibly triple in the next 10 years in terms of that total asset value of that market. So it's going to be fundamentally important that, thank you very much, Jeff. It's going to be fundamentally important that if all of us are going to participate in this market, there's enough of the pie for us as business owners, right, or individuals selling this data to take a portion of what we own in that relative global market. Next slide, please. Awesome. And what we found in the earliest days of TARTLE is that there was no good mechanism, no simple, balanced mechanism for businesses or individuals, right, essentially entities, to monetize the data assets that they create. And those data assets essentially fall into two categories here. For businesses do their own research and analysis, right? If you're a biopharmaceutical company or a pharma company specifically, or even a chemical manufacturer, you have specific data or assay analysis or testing, or essentially market response that occurs from the use of your product. That's very proprietary information to you and what you're doing. And then on top of that, say, for instance, you run a completely online business, right? And you have people interacting with a website, or for instance, an app, if you're one of those founders. There's great amounts of metadata that's actually collected from people interacting with your systems, products, or services. So you have that metadata, and then you also have the proprietary research data. And if you can combine both of those things, now you have interesting data assets that can be monetized on the TARTLE marketplace. So next slide, please. So what we've done is we've created that first marketplace, a global one that is freely accessed. There's no cost to the use of this marketplace, to allow data sellers and data buyers to come together in a manner that's equanimous and fair amongst both parties, to share that information, move it out of silos, and receive money in return for doing that sort of sharing. And what we found is that with this incentive structure, people and entities taking this process are far more apt to share information that has otherwise been locked away or is highly sensitive, right, or of a higher value when it comes to sharing data than otherwise they would choose to share in the first place. Because one of the best incentives in the world, as you all know, are financial incentives. And if we compare that with the idea and fluidity of data sharing, now you have something really magical that's occurring. Next slide, please. So for the people that are selling the data, they have the ability to share and actually gain financial income from that sharing, right? And for an ESG impact, we offer structures within our marketplace for people to donate portions of their proceeds to, as you can see here in the background, Big 7 not-for-profits or charitable organizations across the globe. So say, for instance, as an example, I as an entity want to sell some research that we have from our startup. And from that, I'm going to net $1,000 in revenue from the sale of that one data asset. I can choose to portion off 1% or 10% or 100% of those earnings towards a not-for-profit of my choice. And all of that value can get tailored over to those individuals. So we have a unique balance here of that the individual or entity can earn, right, the business, but also can then uplift through the data sharing at the same time. So for instance, we have research hospitals that work with us, and many of them source a lot of data through our marketplace, and many of them are also not-for-profits. So they'll list themselves as not-for-profits and then purchase the data and also receive income in return from those people that are participating in that data sharing. And it has a very balanced life cycle approach to essentially this give and take scenario that we have going on here. Now for the data buyers, this is an interesting setup. Data buyers, they have the ability to go out and source things that are highly specific, things that are only pertinent to their business, to answer pressing questions or things that will help them with their operations or expertise. In coming on to TARTLE, sourcing data from startups like yourselves allows them to own those assets. So there's two things that happen here in balance, is that if enterprises are coming to TARTLE and sourcing data from other startups, the startup gets to increase their assets on their balance sheet, but also the enterprise at the same time. And that enterprise spend that occurs for that data is actually an R&D spend because they're actually buying research, which is an interesting tax deductible nature if you work with your accounting teams on this for when it comes to sourcing that information. So there's actually, a two-step benefit when it comes to this sort of purchasing or selling, in your case, for ones that want to monetize their data. And the best part about it is that we're ethically sourcing it. And what that means in a technological level is that the TARTLE marketplace facilitates a proprietary blockchain that makes sure that there is consent and record of exchange for every single transaction that occurs. So with that, and Jeff, I'll be happy to answer that later. That's a great question. And so with that record of consent and exchange, what that means is that that data is shown that there was a transfer of value of that asset from party A to party B. So the person that actually holds that asset is actually de-risked in the function of data ownership because there's a clear and well-driven record, right, that shows that I sourced this data at this time from this respective company or startup, and I am now the official owner of that asset itself. And many enterprises find that beneficial as third-party data is becoming more of a risk, and they're moving into first-party or source data with what we call it here at TARTLE. Next slide, please. Fantastic. So if you guys are curious how TARTLE makes money, and I think this is fundamentally important because we are a business and we have servers that we have to run, every single transaction that occurs, so say for instance, I was going to sell just myself a data packet for $1, I get 100% of the value for that data packet. The data buyer who's coming in to purchase it from me will pay me that dollar and then pay 22 cents on that dollar to TARTLE to run the servers as a data administration fee for the marketplace. So it's volume-based economics for how we run our model. Next slide, please. So let's get to the brass tacks here of why you guys have actually showed up. Enough about us and our background. Let's talk about the benefits. And Hall had briefly described this, right, in the introduction here, but this really breaks down into 4 distinct things that we should all keep in mind. And again, this works for business entities or individuals. It's in and all of the same. So if I am going through an M&A transaction, or if I'm in conversations with venture capital groups or private equity or family offices of the sort, and I have a specific valuation on my business, and my business is in products and services, it becomes tremendously helpful if I have an asset price to the data that's actually sitting inside of our servers, because that is information that can be acted upon, information that can actually drive dollar value back into the business. So whether it's M&A transactions from investment bankers, right, or private equity or venture capitalists, the way they see it now and going forward in the foreseeable future, that the only companies that will exist are technology companies. The word fintech will go away. Brick and mortar will go away. Everything will quickly move into the realm of strict technology, and how you use that technology and how you open up the information that drives that technology, which is the fundamental support of your business, is going to increase that value of it, soup to nuts, whether you're looking at it on paper in a financial model or how it's actually being viewed in a contract negotiation. Now, the second beauty of it is that if you're monetizing data, which is so inherently obvious, is that it's a new income stream for you. Many startups know, and we had been through this difficulty, that everyone's like, you're trying to achieve certain monthly recurring revenue or ARR marks, okay? And you want to do everything under the sun, especially during a 4 to 6 month enterprise sales cycle process, to continue to drive more revenue for your business, right? More revenue, better valuation, and everybody knows that cash is king and it's the lifeblood of design, right? So by generating this new income stream, the benefits will be inherently obvious, and you can do this many times over through the marketplace. And it doesn't have a cost associated with that effort of actually generating those data assets for sale. So it's about the work that you're putting in to actually turn something into an asset which can be monetized. The other beauty of it is that you have a balance sheet asset, right? So if you're looking at, again, total value outside of the revenue itself, just holding these fungible pieces of data assets shows that the asset growth of the company, the overall value, essentially static value of the business outside of the revenue or currency which it receives, is also increasing at the same time. So 2 and 3 and 1 actually work in pair. And 4 is really the beauty of it from a CCPA, GDPR, HIPAA alignment, is that, if you're in the healthcare space, is the chain of ownership and custody. Having proof to show who owns the data, where it goes for when and what price, is something that de-risks your ability to house that data and have your research in your systems going forward, especially as the socio-political atmosphere changes and the general public becomes more aware of the value of that data itself, much like how much that data is valued right now, and that's why you're coming here to listen to this presentation. Next slide, please. So just give a little context here. If you're looking at any of the big four, for instance, here we have EY and PwC. These are just a couple of quotes from things that they're constantly telling their M&A teams, is that innovators are now also marrying internal and external data with data science capabilities to drive real origination and post-acquisition value creation. What does that jargon and jarble actually mean? What they're saying is that they are using data, right, and forcing their clients of PwC, to use the data that they have to actually increase the valuations of transactions in the businesses which they are underwriting and evaluating, right? And then you move over to the other side here. You said every organization now needs to understand data's potential as a business asset. And EY, PwC, and the other members of the Big Four are currently working on certain aspects of how to price that data on the balance sheets. And there's many different ways to look at it, but the greatest difficulty that they've seen over time is that there hasn't been a publicly traded value. So for instance, enterprises will come to us and actually ask us, so when they have conversations with their tax teams, right, or they have conversations with venture capitals, they'll be like, hey, TARTLE, can you actually help us price what this data looks like so that we can better appropriate it to our balance sheets? Next slide, please. So this gets a little interesting here, and I hope you guys have like a pen and paper. I know this is recorded, but over the many years, we've seen that there's specific nuances to the economics of data, right? Data is a lot different than a car. Cars are very static items. Once they're built, they sort of depreciate, and there's not really much goes into it except, physical labor, the gasoline, the work, the service, and, the raw material. But when you're looking at data, there's so many aspects of it that allow it to be defined, shaped, and molded. And with all of those aspects, they help define the price, or how that price is actually going to look when something meets the marketplace itself. And what we found, or have identified over time, are these 8 or 9 variables, and I hope I counted correctly, for things that are most pertinent when it comes to the data pricing when a enterprise or a startup is listing their data for sale on the marketplace itself. Now, these aren't in any specific order, right, of value or priority. They're all extremely important. But when you're looking at your own data internally, whether that be research or analysis information or metadata that your company has, you should start to catalog these things into an internal data catalog with these specific pieces in place. And you can find this. So variable or static is quite easy, right? This is a very binary approach. Does the information change often, or is this sort of a one-time analysis that won't happen again, right? And with that, what you find is that there's typically a data premium when it comes to things that are more variable, because if things are changing, that's better for people's algorithms or business processes, because I'm not looking all the way in the past to assume something will happen tomorrow. I can look 10 seconds ago to understand what's going on with this data, and then really have a better understanding for my own predictive models for what's going to happen next. This next one's interesting here is cost of acquisition. Cost of acquisition is what it actually takes for your business to get that data. So if you think about your cost of goods sold, right? If you're looking at your own financial models here and what it takes to actually sell a piece of your product, you should look at it in the same instance of what are the pieces it takes for you to actually generate one piece of data, right? Or that actual data asset, the time, the people, the salary that actually goes into it for the people to do it, where you have to go. Essentially, all those costs involved to make that piece of data actually sit on your server is what's going to call you your cost acquisition. And that's something at a base level that you want to net back when it comes to monetizing that data itself. Now, data level, this is interesting here. Data level is a function of either me as the business, I am generating this data, so this data level is proprietary, or the data is research, right? And that research is saying someone's done the work before, I've put it together, and now I'm writing up something on other people's pre-done work. If it's legitimately proprietary, then again, that has a premium to something that's already available data within the general internet marketplace as itself. Size of file, transfer file, those are typically relatively the same unless something is zipped that is being sold, right? Frequency of the update. So again, if this is going to be a variable item, how frequently does it get updated? Is it real time? Does it happen every minute? Does it happen every hour, month, quarter? You get the idea with that. And the point of time when it was last updated. This is an interesting economic aspect. So anybody out there that trades options understands, with the time value of money and depreciation, essentially the volatility premiums when it comes to certain assets, that as time moves forward or closer towards an execution price, and I hope I'm not losing anyone, there's going to be a change in the value of what that asset is. So knowing when the last time that information was actually updated actually helps deal with what the premium that's actually being received on that data asset itself. Take a step beyond it. Now, say there's data here that is identifiable. If you were selling information, right, that could easily say or come back to me, Tartle, to say that this is in fact Tartle's data, that's highly identifiable, right? Or if it's data on people, if that's identifiable, that would determine a higher price because for owning and housing that data denotes a higher risk. That higher risk is that if somebody were to break into your systems or servers to actually take some of your data and some sort of cybersecurity threat, they could then identify other people which you are now housing the asset of information on. So that would then denote a higher price on the marketplace, selling things that are identified versus non-identified. And then the last of these substructures here is raw versus structured. And what that is saying is that, do I just have a bunch of information that is just being generated ad hoc from IoT devices or anything else of the sort, just kind of bulked together and thrown here in a pile and let somebody else on the other side deal with it? Or is it going to be something that's structured? Say, for instance, in the simplest format, survey data. It has very logical rows and columns, context and construct, which defines what this thing is, and it's readily and easily ingested into a system which many other people out there are apt to adopt. So when you look at these different items here, you should have some context when putting together your data catalog or your idea of what assets you currently have in place, and making sure that these specific pieces of information, the things that actually create or characteristics of the data, are all filled out in category, because that will actually help with the pricing nature of the data itself. Next slide, please. So Everyone's probably wondering, is there a cost to doing this, right? Like what's the juice? How does it work? We actually do this for free here at TARTLE. We think it's fundamentally beneficial. It's a part of our impact-based model that we increase data sharing and spend our time helping businesses and people to price this data effectively. So to do so, we have our head of customer success, Matthew Smith. You can book a time with him anytime. He doesn't have to sleep. We can keep him up all night if need be. Fantastic worker here at TARTLE, and he can actually work with you and your enterprise or startup to go through this process with those specific points that I talked about, characteristics of the data, and help you find a price for all these things within your data catalog. And then from that, after you've gone through that process, we will help you generate a unique buyer link. So if you are in conversation with some sort of company, whoever it might be, maybe a potential prospect or customer, and you have data that you think would be beneficial to their other enterprise, you could share this unique link with them where they could go in and buy this data directly from you through the marketplace itself. Option number one, and that comes with every single unique data asset that you choose to list on TARTLE. Or the other one is to say, I will have my data listed on TARTLE, and I can also choose to just sell it in the open market. There are many enterprise buyers, around 50,000 currently on our marketplace, that will come and actually source data in an asynchronous format from people that are selling it or enterprises that are selling it through the TARTLE marketplace platform. So to have those things listed there and also in conversation under your control to share a very unique link, both of those options will be available after you go through your pricing consultation on the actual data itself with Matthew Smith. Next slide, please. So here's the beauty of this. One and done is all good, right? But if you are running an enterprise that sells a product or service, it's going to be fundamentally important to keep that flywheel going that generates more assets on your balance sheets and continues to increase that revenue stream. So the beauty here of this data flywheel is that stage one for the people that are listening is to monetize your company's data sets, right? In doing so, that's going to give you 1, 2, 3, and 4, the 4 points we made at the beginning for why you should be doing something like this. And then that's going to transition you into something else. It's like after you have monetized it, what you realize is that the process was so simple and you started to have such a keen focus, right, on this essentially development of data monetization into your product strategy, that there's going to be new opportunities. There's going to be new research. There's going to be new questions or insights that need to be found or expounded upon within your business itself. So you would want to actually dip back in and say, enhance old research that you may have, fill the gaps, supplement more data that you're currently bringing in within your business. So you can come back to the marketplace and now source more data from individuals who are probably the adopters of your product or service, or source data directly from businesses that are, again, selling their data much like you are on the marketplace itself. And then with that, you can enhance your data sets, your metadata, and also your research and analysis, and then go back again and relist those data parts for sale now on the marketplace itself. So in 4 steps, you have this highly cyclical process which continues to move forward. And the more you generates more assets and the annuity stream you can receive going forward of having those assets actually listed on the marketplace. So what we do in a consultative approach is that when we help companies go through the process of monetizing the data, we also help them look at what can you do for filling the gaps and identifying those new opportunities, filling those gaps, and then remonetizing what you have. And the benefit for these things is that you get better insights for further research. You get better understanding from your customers. You get better product market fit for your service or product that you're actually creating. You add to the balance sheet. There's an ESG element that is occurring for your business because you're ethically sourcing this information and you're de-risking that data that you're actually holding. And at the same time, companies who see that you're actually taking this higher ethical and moral approach towards data management and sharing will actually receive a higher engagement from people and respect, and actually, contextual examples for what they are doing in the relative market for people that are actually looking at them and their brand, especially if you are a young brand. For instance, we work with some Fortune 500 enterprises, especially in the healthcare space, that want to find ways to, take the torch-bearing moral and ethical leading nature of sourcing data directly from individuals so that they can do better in-house underwriting analysis on those groups and deliver better health outcomes for those people going forward. So they'll come to Tartle in this data flywheel approach that we have here to open up this opportunity, sourcing the information, enhancing the data sets, reselling, decreasing costs to their end users, increasing their own revenues, and then repeating that cycle over and over. And for them, it's less of a risk to hold that information for how it's being sourced, right? And how it's being sold through an independent third party rather than saying, oh, yeah, we're as ethical as it gets. No, they would come to Tartle as the gold standard for doing so. And we help enterprises of any nature in any vertical with taking about that process. Next slide, please. So when you're, like I said from the previous one, if you're collecting more data from your customers, you get better customer insights, you get more balance sheet assets, which you can then monetize. And there's a higher ESG impact element for your business that you otherwise wouldn't have had in the first place. But you can take that approach quickly and efficiently with the monetization and sourcing of the data itself through the Tartle marketplace. Next slide, please. Voila, that is it. So I would love to open it up to any questions. I'm sure, I know Jeff's got a bunch of questions. He's highly active, but Hall or Shane, if you guys want to choose whichever top one's first, I'd be happy to answer it.
Yeah, Alexander, let's go ahead and start with Jeff's 2 questions. If anybody in the room has a question, please put it in the chat box. Chris, I see your hand is raised. Please put that in the chat box and we'll do that next. But we'll start with Jeff's questions and move from there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Jeff, the first question you have, what types of clauses or wording should we have in our privacy policies to enable us to use your platform? Great question. So the way our system is designed is that Tartle, from a technological stance, is removed from controlling or seeing that data itself. We do not have special privileges for the management of that data in the system or to see it or to use it to our own privilege, much like larger companies like Facebook or Google can do when they have that information in place stored on their servers. We're actually barred from it. If we want it, we actually have to participate as market participants and source that information. And when you talk about those clauses or wording, what you want to do is you want to make sure that words of control, right? Levels of encryption, restriction from the actual server housing, and there's a couple other I can share directly from our privacy policy with you, and I'll walk you through it. That should be there in place to empower the individuals that are, one, storing that data, or enterprises storing of that information, and then 2, the sourcing of that information as an asset. So in the privacy policy, there should be clear delineation that the data which your company would be sourcing from a third party like this, we have gone through and we have sourced this data from here ethically using this platform, which falls under these specific mechanics or properties. And this is why this is the market leading approach to do so. And this is the benefit that both parties receive. It's so important that you share the balance of the benefit for both parties in the transaction. And if that is clearly stated in the privacy policy or your terms of service, and it's done simply, you're going to find yourself in a good spot here. And I'd be more than happy to share those later. If you send me an email, I can pull those right out of the privacy policy for you. What else we got here?
Can your system calculate the depreciation of a record's value over time?
Yes, that's correct. So what you find is that as time increases, we can actually help you with this pricing here to actually show how that record value or that data asset is decreasing over time. And that's something we can work with you on in the data packet consultation. 100%, most definitely.
Next question is, how do you ensure accuracy?
Yeah, interesting question here. So I would actually like you to expound upon that. What do you mean ensure accuracy? In what format? And in regards to what, Thomas, if you wouldn't mind pinging us again here. Did he chime in? No, nothing yet.
While he's writing that in, let's go to the next question. How do we support dynamic data sets on the platform?
Oh, fantastic. So in terms of dynamic data sets, right? You have 2,000 fields. Each individual has its own origination date, last data. Fantastic. Some third party. We have a very well-designed API for our system. So if you have something highly dynamic that is moving a lot, we can work with you to get that tied in and generate those data assets automatically on the marketplace itself. That is something bespoke that we can do for your business if it's highly, highly variable and dynamic with what you're talking about. But we can turn that into a highly automated process with our API. Fantastic ask. We do that for some of our clients right now.
Next question comes from Chris Salter. They're working in the pre-K and special needs market, and they want to capture data by having people volunteer information through surveys. You can read more in the chat. Is any pitfalls with that as a data collection model?
Yeah, so you have to be clear here. If you are in pre-K and special needs markets, it's not the fact that they're in special needs or pre-K. It's a function of age and whether or not the person was actually forced into answering something, and was there an ease at which those people were actually answering said survey, which you're talking about collecting. We help school systems to actually query through a survey format. Say, for instance, parents or students 13 plus, if the students are participants in the marketplace itself, certain data pieces that are needed to help them understand what they should change for daily routines, or if there are other offerings should occur, or something's happening with the educational structure of the classroom for the day. It's essentially an active feedback mechanism tool. And when you're talking about privacy here, we consider ourselves the leader in this privacy because the individual who is participating, or the entity that is selling that data, is in 100% in control of it. We have no way to manipulate it. We have no way to take that data and force people into making a decision. In an asynchronous format, they come to Tartle and choose to participate on their own free will and time. So that allows us a specific regulatory arbitrage in that stance to participate in markets that are otherwise unparticipable for other groups or enterprises that are trying to source data from, say, groups that are pre-K and special needs markets. And I hope that answers that. And if not, feel free to send me an email and we can go on to that further.
Next question is, I often see pitches from startups that say we're a data company, but they have no idea what the data is worth or who they will sell it to. Would you recommend early stage startups reach out to Tartle to discuss how you should communicate that?
Yeah, absolutely. I will share something to all the listeners here. The longest and most difficult process in this world is education. And if you are a new business with a new idea, a new product or service, the real glory that you will find from people adopting it comes down to education. In calling something a data business is one thing, but being able to specifically identify the aspect of data itself, what is it that is so niche about your data aspect that needs to be expounded upon, that can be shared, that can be readily understood and ingested at a cognitive level for the people that have never had any interaction with your business before. So most definitely we can help you through that process, because we learned those growing pains for a long time, from 2015 to 2019, when people thought we were crazy with the idea that people in businesses could actually monetize and sell data. When people be like, what are you talking about data? What is data? What is data? What does that mean to me? And that's a very long educational process. And if you want to learn from our mistakes, feel free to reach out to us, give us a call, or hop on a meeting. We can walk you through that.
Thomas gave us more details about how do you know the data is accurate. And the question is, how do I know the emails, phone number, et cetera, are accurate? Historically, the data have bought is at least 30% inaccurate.
Understood. Yeah. So are you saying that you would participate as a data purchaser on the marketplace, now that I understand? We have multiple KYC. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Thank you. We have multiple algorithms, in-house algorithms, that occur in the background of the fabric of what's going on with our marketplace itself. The very first part of that nature is to make sure that there is a legitimate human being that actually owns the information, or entity that owns that information, that's being put onto the marketplace itself. And through a flurry of different things within our own algorithm, we apply a rating scale to every single account out of the millions of accounts that are on Tartle, and would allow you to go and source that data with the highest level of confidence, right? That data is in fact accurate. And with that, we also create specific structures in every single data packet to pre-verify that info ahead of time, so that when you go to do that purchasing, one, you're going to have a high response rate. We see anywhere typically from 75 to 94% are people that choose to interact and sell their data on Tartle. And with that, you'll see most of the time an even higher rate of people sharing very accurate data, and data that you could only ever imagine or dream up that could be shared on a marketplace, could be purchased. And so just to give you some context, a very large leading data packet on Tartle is one specifically around social determinants of health. And you could learn everything about an individual's psychometric profiles, behaviors, where they sleep, what they eat, the money they make, how they feel about themselves and others within social circles. Anything you want to get will be directly from that person. And if you're talking about accuracy, accuracy is a function of the structure of which you are trying to pull that data from people. And we do everything on our back end and front end for the users that are using it to make sure you are getting the most accurate data possible. Thank you for asking that, Thomas. Great question.
I'm afraid we're out of time for the questions. Next up, we have Todd Hartman of Health Connects who will come in. Alexander, if you could put your email in there, several people asked for that, and that'll help them get in touch with you right after the presentation. For those questions we did not get, we'll follow up and give you a written response later. They were great questions. We just ran out of time. There's so many good ones here. And then Alexander will share with you his email so you can always reach out to him directly if you have questions before we get the recording back to you. We will send the recording and a follow-up email after this session, but you're welcome to reach out directly at any time. But Alexander, thank you for joining us today and for sharing this information, and appreciate your comments and so forth at this point.
Yeah, most definitely. Hall, Shane, thank you very much.
Great. And so now we're going to move over to Todd Hartman. If you, Todd, could go ahead and open up your presentation and go ahead and kick off. And here are two examples. We have Health Connects, and then we'll have Deep Cognition. And these are examples of companies who are monetizing their data. And for those who are interested in this, you can see how they pitch and how it comes across and how they're using the data and so forth. So with that, Todd, go ahead and kick it off. Go ahead.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. And Alexander, excuse me, Alexander, that was a wonderful discussion. And I'm excited, pardon me, to be here to talk to you folks today about how a specific layer of the data world within the healthcare industry can be applied from using certain contextual data. But by way of background, again, I'm Todd Hartman, I'm CEO of Health Connects. My background spans a lot of years in healthcare. Specifically, I was back during the very first part of the days when the manual records, the paper files we all saw in the doctor's offices were being monetized and actionalized through information into what we call practice management systems. So I was one of the first pioneers in the practice management world to bring those practices and transition them, of which they all said, no, we're never going to do this. The paper records are sacred and certainly secure because they're in our office in a file. Well, we all found out that that wasn't quite the case. And then we went from health practice management environments like that to then the health record systems, or EMR platforms, which have now become pervasive. But again, there was this no, we'll never go from our systems of record to that of an electronic mechanism such as that. But now here we are. Then there was this thing called, we're going to go to prescription information and we're going to automate prescriptions. Well, doctors said, no, not only no, but hell no, we're never going to give up our prescription pads because that's sacred and it's very secure. And we know how that worked. Now, 95% of every doctor in America is using electronic prescribing. So that's kind of how healthcare has evolved, very stubbornly, very struggling to get to a point where adopting good sound methodologies has been a thing. That's where Health Connects comes in, because over this evolution of time, healthcare has been sort of a slow gate into getting into real points of real information, that is real-time information, taking advantage of machine learning and AI techniques. Or virtually all professional sports today, you could never imagine a play being called without the call coming from the box with every detail on that player, on that next defensive call or offensive call. Even trucking and transportation industries are all very much deep into advanced real-time information. But again, healthcare struggled for this. So because healthcare is kind of like panicking now, everybody's jumping in with big data, and big data is a big deal and it works, it's a good thing. But it's not necessarily elastic to the needs of healthcare in every dimension of care. So hence we have this swimming in data and starving for information where it really matters. So that's what the problem really is. And if you look back in the early days of this care cycle, 1975-ish, there was this basic standard of care where we took all of the vital signs, which told the care providers really a lot of what they needed to know. But look how much time they had with the patients in those days. The time was 60 minutes, then it went to 30, then it went to 20. Today, we're down to 12 minutes because of the compression of value and the time of that doctor with that patient to get a massive amount of information and make a decision. The fact is, there's not enough information at the time of care today to make the critical decisions on diagnostics and the next steps. The results, lots of things are missed. Lots of mistakes are being made because they're assuming about the patient's condition rather than knowing. The cost of this is overwhelming to the industry today because the absence of the whole patient look is what's been missing. Lack of timely and actionable data right at the point of care. Here's how we take a look at this. The whole person view is where we come into this. That's 3 dimensions of care. It's the behavioral or mind impact. It's the social or life impact, social implications. Then it's compliance to therapy, that is adherence to medications. Those 3 make up a huge amount of what's really needed for every patient consultation. These are the patient modifiable sets that account for 90% of every patient. That result means doctors can stop assuming and actually start knowing about what's going on. At a patient level, here's how it looks. Care providers request data today. They can use it from a tablet or anywhere. They request data about a patient at the time of care or in advance from an appointment standpoint. They pull data in on 3 layers. MPC Mind, MPC RX, and MPC Life. That is maximum patient context about what they're thinking, their minds, moods, and emotions and feelings, and the prescription information and the social determinant information. We gather that in real time and then send it right back to the provider who requested it in real time. That's better insights, better treatment, and better outcomes because those 3 sets of data give you the power and the providers the power to know exactly what to do. It works at a patient level or at a population level if you're trying to track overall population sets either in cohorts or in disease states. Here's another way to look at it. If you look at each layer of the determinants we just talked about, MPC Life is about all of these social determinants that you know we have about this patient. We can find them in a second. And then we combine that with the prescription information that they have that we find in a second, and that MPC Mind, that means that social data that we collect on those patients. Then we roll that into what is really the issue with the patient. Is it an issue of care, chronic care management, an adherence issue, a patient engagement issue? That's how we get to optimizing value-based care, which is going to be the standard of care. We connect the dots. We connect the dots of what's going on between each of these insights and map them to which value-based care model you may be working into or patient treatment care. So today we're signing up huge amounts of partner activity. We sell to the platforms, not to the end user. The platforms today are actually taking data from the sources of truth. That's what Health Connects would be. And they use this data in their platforms, and then they put that out to their customer, the health systems and the doctors. So that really has a lot of economy of scale to us. So from a use case standpoint, you've heard us talk about that. We can look for use cases with our channel partners, or these partner platforms who are doing the big lift to get to the end user hospitals and health systems in the country. They're our customer. Why? Because we can scale them and talk about a business model and a transactional monetization strategy. Here's how we do that. We charge a $2.50 transaction fee on a per patient basis. To put that in context, an average medical record today costs somewhere between $15 and $20 to move. This information has more impactable value than that medical record does in the first 30 days of a patient treatment, especially at the time of care. So our revenue target, you see what we're aiming to this year. We need 12 channel partners. We need 12 clients on each of those partners, doing a very minimal transaction level to get us to that run rate and that annual recurring revenue mark. The timing is great. The addressable market we think is very powerful. There's more investment in healthcare today in digital health into these platforms than any other time in the history of it, and therefore we believe we have an upside that we can ride into that.
But thank you so much for a great presentation.
Very good.
And at this point, I'd like to bring up Deep Cognition to give their pitch.
Thank you. Okay, great. Hi, this is Mandeep, and I am CEO and co-founder of Deep Cognition. And I think Alexander gave an excellent presentation about data. And then one thing I would like to point out is like there is so much. I mean, there are two types of data in the world. Like there are data that is usable and structured, and there is a lot of data that is unstructured and not easily usable, or you can't really make sense of it. Some prime example of that is a lot of data that are sitting in PDF files, right? And maybe these are invoices, maybe these are some other type of documents, right? That's just one example. And it's really difficult to kind of get that information out of those documents and kind of create a version of that data that could be usable by someone else. So I think that's where we come into picture. So we have a platform that is designed to extract information from complex documents like commercial invoices, packing list. So it has two advantages. One advantage is it automates the data entry for business operations. For example, if a business process requires data entry people who are manually entering these information into a ERP or TMS software, this software actually automates that process and thus reducing the total cost of running that particular data entry operations because of the automation. So you get immediate benefit right over there. But in addition, this platform can also be used to kind of analyze historical unstructured information within the enterprises and then create data lakes or more structured databases on which more advanced tools could be run, and then it can help you decision making on that. So a platform can be used two ways. At this point, we are highly focused on the first part because that's where people can see immediate ROI, and we are focused on logistics segment, and we are having great success. We recently signed Savino Delben, one of the largest freight forwarder in Italy, who chose us over some of our competitors like Rosum, Vector.ai, and Amazon Text Extract. And they used to, for a long invoice, long commercial invoice of let's say 90 pages, they used to spend 40 hours. Now it's only 2 minutes of human time. So tremendous savings that they have achieved. I want to answer one question, like why this technology is coming now and why it wasn't possible, for example, 5 years before. The answer to that is, even though documents looks very simple to humans and they can easily see where the information lies, but for a computer, if you do traditional programming, it's a very, very difficult task because information is not at the fixed places and the layout keep varying. And so most of these documents are designed for human consumption. So the deep learning has evolved to a point where where we are able to kind of take those algorithms and take natural language processing algorithms and create a proprietary system that can very accurately look at a document and create information out of that. These are some complexities of the documents. For example, here you can see a line item where information is crammed in and it's not very clear, like for example 37.92, what that actually means. You have to look at the header, how the header is structured. So I mean, I won't go into too much detail because we don't have enough time, but these kind of problems will cause a lot of our competitors systems useless because these are like very complex way of arranging information. Our software has no problem extracting this information and putting that into a structured table easily. So here is our product roadmap moving forward. For example, data collection is in our roadmap. In fact, this year we are already collecting every single line item. So a lot of the first use case that we are currently very successful with is customs clearance use case. So we collect a lot of information related to at what price the products were purchased from the which suppliers, and and how many products are being imported, what are the classification of those products. So it's a very valuable information that we are collecting, and our roadmap moving forward is to kind of show that information to the same customer, so they can actually look at like what's going on within their businesses, and then eventually to take the information for individual freight forwarders and then combine them into a global data set that could be then monetized in an ethical manner, while rewarding the original data sources as well. Our software itself is focused on self-service way of doing things. So what that means is that we are building the software where AI labeling and training and post-processing can be controlled by the end customers' teams, and they don't need to necessarily come back to us. So it's more of a licensing the software. And our business model revolves around is basically we charge small amount of setup fee, and then per page that they process, we typically charge a fee on that between 40 cents to 60 cents. It's a very large market. In 2025 will be $10 billion TAM. So I think there are also other startups that are playing in this, but we are seeing quite a good success. Our roadmap in terms of industries is to kind of dominate freight forwarders first, and then in the second half of next year to go into warehousing and then banking, other sectors. So currently we have 5 customers, Dell, and our ARR is about $280,000 at this point. We have POCs going on with top freight forwarders, not only in the US but also in Europe. We just recently closed Asia Shipping from they're no longer a POC anymore, so they have adopted the solution, is integrated. So we are seeing a great success in here, and then we are aiming for 1 million ARR by middle of next year. Yeah, I think that's about it. We are also raising money, so if you're interested, please feel free to contact me, and I will be able to do investment pitch. Yes.
Thank you, Mandeep, and thank you, Todd, for your presentations. I want to thank our audience. We're at the end of our time now. For those questions we did not able to answer, we will follow up afterwards by email to answer those as well. We put Alexander McCabe's email in the chat box for those who want that also. Appreciate everybody joining us today. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out our session. It was a great one. Appreciate Alexander, Todd, and Mandeep for their presentations. And thank you to the audience for coming out and asking great questions. It's been a great event, and we'll see you next time.